Welcome to Beyond the Build, the podcast where we explore topics that go beyond the construction sites. I'm your host, Kelvin Enfinger. Today, we have a guest whose impact on Pensacola and communities across the country is immeasurable. Quint Studer is an entrepreneur, author, nationally recognized leadership expert, and founder of the Studer Community Institute. Throughout his career, Quint has helped organizations improve performance, strengthen culture, and develop leaders who create lasting results. But beyond his professional accomplishments, he has become an influential voice in community development and quality of life right here in Northwest Florida. Quint, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Kelvin. Nice to be here. Always nice to see you. And thank you for all your work that you've done in the industry and to promote the trades. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
I appreciate those comments. We really appreciate this industry and what it does for our communities, and we appreciate the people that help build it. I want to get into your journey a little bit and talk about your path to where you are today. I've had an opportunity to hear that. I've had an opportunity to read about it, but I want the listeners to hear a little bit about where you've come from and what led you to Pensacola.
This show an 8-hour docuseries.
I'll let you shorten it up in the fewest words that you can and talk about your early years of your career and then the transition into Pensacola. And then we'll talk a little bit about why you chose to stay here in Pensacola and do what you did.
I just spoke recently at the commencement in Wisconsin at a college, and I'm going to go even back further than career-wise, Kelvin. And the woman that spoke before me became blind in high school. And then she went to college and she talked about it. She was a student speaker, how her goal is to help people. And I moved my talk that night into obstacles become opportunities. So I'll go really quick. I was born with a severe speech impediment. So no one could understand me but my mother. And when I got to school for the first many years, every certain times of the day, a speech pathologist, bless them, would come get me, take me into a room, and I'd have to work on pronouncing difficult words. Now I look back as that helped me deal with failure and helped me understand the power of repetition. So that's one of those things that who would have thought a guy with a speech impediment would do what I do. I got fortunate growing up. I don't hear well. I'm hearing impaired. I'm deaf on my right side. I hear a little bit on my left side. So how's that an advantage for me? Well, I have to listen. So if we're in a meeting, Kelvin, I'm not doing sidebar conversations. I'm not daydreaming. I'm totally focused on whoever is speaking. But it also helps with relationships because people feel like when you and I meet, hopefully you feel listened to. We build relationships. So again, an obstacle became an opportunity. And then I've dealt with my own alcoholism. And at 31 years old, 43 years ago, I crashed and I was suicidal. I had blown through 2 marriages. My car was being repossessed. I weighed 135 pounds and was carrying a little cup to spit blood in. And I was estranged from my family. Now, I had such immense pain, I sought help. So you'll see me talk a lot, Kelvin, over the years on help, therapy, reaching out. You don't have to be alone in this world. So that introduced me to this whole world of recovery, which is a design for living. And it's pretty much what I patterned most of my life on, which is being self-aware, because you got to be self-aware, sharing things on the inside with people that you trust, looking at your own character defects. Prayer is a big part of my life. And so that got me into healthcare. So I was a special ed teacher. If I wasn't an alcoholic, I'd have never got into healthcare. So who knows what you think of something bad? I started working in a treatment facility, and that led me to hospitals, and that led me to Baptist Hospital because I was working at a hospital in Chicago, and we had great results. And Baptist, to their credit, realized their patient experience was extremely low, below, like in the bottom 10% of the country. They had a lot of turnover. And to their credit, instead of saying, oh, it's something else, Al Stubblefield said, we're going to go learn. So Al Stubblefield came down to Chicago and met with me and found out what Holy Cross is doing. Then he had me come to a one-day workshop for the people here. And then he called me in probably March of 2006, so almost 30 years ago, and said, or over 30 years ago, and said, why don't you come be president of Baptist Hospital? So I got to Pensacola because I wanted to, I don't have a master's in healthcare administration or an MBA, so I needed somebody to take a chance on me. And Baptist took a chance on me, and that's how I got to Pensacola, Florida, and loved great employees, great doctors. And of course, we went from being in the bottom 10% to being in the top 1% of healthcare in the United States. So that's sort of my little trip to Pensacola.
I want to talk a little bit about the adversity that you faced in life and what you overcame. And if you had one piece of advice to give anyone that's maybe struggling, or maybe any young leader or seasoned leader that is struggling with adversity in their life, what's the one piece of advice you would give that person to face those challenges and overcome them?
I know exactly. It's find somebody you trust and tell them what's going on. Mark Goldston, who's now deceased, was the expert in suicide, a physician. When they studied suicide, they found out the people that don't take their lives do one thing different than the people that do. And the people that don't take their lives have reached out to someone. And I think you've got to be willing to reach out to someone. Yesterday morning, I got a phone call from a lady who was struggling. And today we got her connected to some help. So I think you don't have to do this alone, but it's pretty hard. Again, this is like the day of help. I met with another gentleman and I suggested he do something, and I could tell he didn't want to, but it was because he thought there'd be a stigma. And that's why I'm so open. I'm not trying to minimize struggles, or I'm also not trying to grandiose struggles. Like, look at me. I'm trying to say that if you don't reach out, you're carrying this alone. And sometimes too, Kelvin, reaching out, just talking about it is helpful. Even if the person doesn't even say anything, you hear yourself differently when you're talking about it. So I think it's really making sure that you find a trusted advisor, a trusted person that you can share what's going on, whether it's a struggle in your job. People come to me because they're struggling in their workplace. So I also think when you have your own adversity, you have empathy for people, because life's not easy. No, reach out to someone and you don't pick somebody that you trust, and pick someone that loves you enough to tell you that you have spinach in your teeth, because people that really love you will hold up the mirror for you. And so you don't want to go to somebody that's just going to glad hand you and say, oh, it's nothing. You want somebody that cares enough about that they can give you honest advice.
That's excellent advice. I recently have really started paying attention to a program that we have through Associated Builders and Contractors, and they've launched a total human health program, and looking at the data that's coming back from the construction industry. And it's really astonishing when you look at the issues with mental health around the construction industry. And so I'm really proud to see that an association that we're a part of has taken an initiative to actually do something about it and address the issues and have honest conversations around it, because construction oftentimes is looked at as an industry of just really tough individuals that don't have any problems and we just know how to overcome them. And that's not always necessarily the case. Regardless of who you are, you're going to face struggles. You're going to face adversities in life, regardless of what industry you're in. And I love what you said about finding somebody to be honest with you, because I've always tried to keep a mentor in my life, regardless of my age or where I'm at in my career growth. And having a mentor and someone that you can talk honestly to is extremely important in anyone's growth.
I would consider construction workers and physicians very much alike. So physicians are geared on keep going no matter what. You're tough. Physicians are tough, and you're trained to be a hero and keep going. Construction workers are tough. They're sort of trained to keep going, finish a job, don't ask for help. I know, Kelvin, I'll tell you stories where I run into people just entering recovery, and they're in the construction trades, and they don't know how they're going to handle it when somebody says, hey, you want this or you want that. And of course, there's also physical pain in the construction industry. It's a very difficult industry, as you get older. So I love what you're doing, because I think that you're saving lives. And that's really what we're all about. Construction trades people make a better community facility-wise. But man, they also make a better community just because of who they are. They're raising kids, families, husbands, wives, partners. And yeah, I think what you're doing is remarkable. And it's sort of like lawyers. There's different industries that have lawyers for concerned lawyers, for example, that help others. There's pilots that help, because these are high-end professions where people are afraid they'll be judged. And construction can be a very dangerous, exacting, perfectionist organization with, I think, very, very highly skilled people. So I think the characteristics of pilots lawyers, physicians, and trades all have a lot in common.
I think when you get to know people too, most people generally want to help others, regardless of what the industry is. And deep down inside, most humans have that kind of want to and the ability to help others. It's I think it's the honest conversation that surrounds it that oftentimes people get uncomfortable with, and that prevents them from, helping someone. I appreciate you sharing what you just shared, by the way. It was not what I had planned to open up and talk about, but I think it's an important topic, and I'm glad we covered it because I think it's a good segue into leadership and organizational culture. And as we think about what keeps great employees around and what keeps employees healthy and what keeps them happy in the workplace, I wanted to ask you, what do you think separates great organizations from average ones?
Well, I think if real organizations take training and development very seriously. And I think if you look at research shows that people want a company that cares about their well-being. Well, if you're in the trades, you're skilled people. These are skilled people. So I think great organizations invest in their people. And I think, great organizations, if we send somebody to one of your programs, for example, that's not an expense, that's an investment. And I can always tell an owner who I think gets it when they look upon investing in their people in training and development, apprenticeships, internships, when they call it an investment, that's who I want to work for. The ones that look upon investing in people as an expense, they're going to have issues. So I think being willing to invest. Now, for leaders, I think it's also taking ownership, Kelvin, of yourself. I write columns. You go to LinkedIn. I have 33,000 people read my column every Monday morning. And the column recently was somebody was telling me they really appreciated their company because of the training and development they get. And I said, well, what do you do beyond what you're getting from your company? Because I truly find the highest performing people are curiosity and seeking better ways to do things. So I think company-wise, I'm looking for, are you investing in your people? For a leader-wise, I'm sort of asking, tell me what latest book you've read. Tell me what concern or worry you've searched out. Tell me what tool or technique that you're investigating right now. We always want that for a physician. You go to a physician, you're hoping they're keeping track of the latest best practices. Construction's the same way. Trades are the same way. But there's so much coming at people and so much out there. I'm looking for people that are self-driven. That's about 38% of the people, by the way, Kelvin. About 38% of the people will learn on their own. About 34% of the people will be good students if you teach them. About 8% of the people exhaust us.
Mm-hmm. Something I've picked up on in your writings is accountability at all levels, not just accountability with the workforce, with the employees, but accountability even in executive leadership. And I think that has a lot to do with great organizations cultivating their people and people wanting to stay and wanting to grow there. If you're creating a level of accountability to where sometimes it's something as simple as saying, hey, I messed up and I'm going to own it and I'm going to recognize that. And we're going to learn from it, and we're going to grow from it together.
Well, that's what creates the high performer from the non-high performer. Number one is the ability to trust. Take the word accountability and also use the word trust, because it's amazing to me. Trust has a deeper meaning to people, but it's accountability. I trust that if you say something, you're going to get it done, or at least tell me, like you said, why not? Sometimes projects are going to run over budget, but if the person says, here's what we're facing versus afterwards. So I think it's trust. You can count on me. That's trust. You can count on what I'm telling you, which is honest and factual. That is trust. So I'm a big believer in psychological safety, though, Kelvin. I think I write on this quite a bit. In order to have people trust you, like you just talked about, and be accountable and even say when they made a mistake, you have to have psychological safety. Psychological safety is, I feel I can bring you questions. I feel I can give you feedback that might not be positive, like, why are we doing this? And have you thought about this? And it also means psychological safety is, if I bring to you a mistake, you're going to handle it in a more humanistic way instead of, why don't we bring mistakes to the boss? Because we're afraid how they're going to handle it. So, okay, if I never bring it to I might not get in trouble. If I do bring it to him, then I might get in trouble. So I'm just going to lay low and hope nobody finds out. So I'm more and more using the word trust in accountability. Accountability, people can see as a checklist. I just trust what you tell me. You're going to be impeccable with your word. And, the company you work for, I've always been impressed because I think they're impeccable with their word whenever I've worked with them.
Integrity is at the forefront of everything we do. And one of the things I've been talking to some of the guys about recently, especially some of the younger guys trying to invest, in leadership growth, as we were talking about this the other day, is bad news will always be bad news. And of course, I want to be that individual that can accept bad news and not have that negative reaction. And I try to be very conscious of that and make sure that my initial reaction is a good reaction, because sometimes it's hard to go back and undo negative reactions. But we were talking about that the other day, and any delay in bad news isn't going to make it any better. So, the sooner we find out about an issue, or the sooner we can talk about it, the sooner we can work through it and try to work through it in a positive way. But certainly don't delay on it, because I don't think I've ever seen a situation where bad news got any better when you just sat on it and waited it out, hoping it was going to get better.
Well, when you see it, you say it. But that's also, Kelvin, when we put people into leadership positions that don't invest in them. So as I go around the country, I'll ask people, how many of you became a leader because your boss quit and they had to quickly find a person to take your boss's place, and they came to you? And if you said you didn't want to do it, they said, well, can you just do it temporarily? Can you just do it on the interim? And of course you say yes. And then I say, how long does that last? And of course they'll say forever. And I'll say, how much training and development did you get? And they'll say none. We would not take somebody and put them into who's never done masonry work and said, yeah, I noticed you drove a truck real good. Monday, you're going to be doing masonry work without some training and development. And being a leader is, even if you're good at your job, whether it's welding, whether it's plumbing, whether it's architecture, planning, engineering, whatever it is, doesn't mean you know how to lead people. It knows how you do projects. So I think when I get asked, what's my biggest concern? It's always the lack of investment in training and development that companies do. Because you're putting somebody in a very tough spot, and they've never done this type of budget before. They've never had to have a conversation with somebody, a performance conversation. They've never had somebody show disrespect in front of other people. They've never, I joke, Kelvin, about Pensacola when I'm traveling the country. I said, I live in a Navy town, and I said, you talk about stupid people, it's the Navy. I mean, the Navy wastes so much money. Do you know what they do? Before somebody's in a leadership role, they actually invest in them and train them and simulate leadership. Just think if they did what we did. You just walk up to somebody and said, hey, I noticed you're here. Why don't you go pilot this plane for a while, and we'll just call it interim? Or why don't you be an admiral on this boat? And of course, I respect the Navy greatly, because what they do is they not realize they can't put someone in a role that they don't have experience or skill building in.
I think that's the key word to everything I've been hearing you say since we got on this. You've used that word invest several times. And as companies, whether we're investing into workforce development through organizations that are providing it, or we're trying to do some of it internally, it's really the key to not only our success, but the industry's success. And you and I have had several conversations about this and kind of talked in depth about workforce development, the need for it to get young men and women back interested in skilled trades, not just construction, but there's a variety of skilled trades out there. You and I both agree the importance of education, but there's a connection, I think, that we've got to make between education and workforce development. I'd like to hear from you, your thoughts on how you think we can better connect as an industry to get involved to help with those connections and get the education system really connected into these skilled trade programs.
Well, I think a lot of what you do and your associations do is, and my wife and I, Rishi, are very into trades. My dad was a mechanic, so we love the trades. And part of it is not acting like the trades are any less than anything. That's why in my book, Results at Last, which was number 5 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, I talk about masonry workers. They go by and say they did brickwork. They said, we built a cathedral. I also think the investment has to be one. There's a construction company I did a workshop for, and I learned a lot about them. And one of the things that amazed me, Kelvin, is they hired a financial coach for all their workers, because they know, even though I'm really good at this trade, I don't have a financial coach. It was very confidential, but helping them understand what to do with their money. Again, this wasn't a group like 401k or anything like that. This was purely financial literacy training. Because you and I know, I've been there where an employee comes, knocks on my door and says they need a pay raise. And why do you need a pay raise? Well, because my truck payment is due. Why did you get a cheaper truck? So I think that the other thing I think is really cool, Kelvin, is career maps. So we did a project in Wisconsin, Kelvin, and the person that ran the project was a guy named Isaiah Baker. Isaiah Baker started with his company at 18. In fact, he cleaned out. His first job was cleaning out a basement of an old building that we owned. But now here he is 31, and he's running the project for us, for the company in Wisconsin. And he would never leave that company, Kelvin, because they keep investing in his career. But I think in nursing, they call it career ladders. And it doesn't mean you get promoted, but you're constantly improving someone's skill set to show them their path that they can go.
Oftentimes I see in the construction industry where a lot of individuals that are in the workforce have so much potential, but they've stopped growing, maybe either because they don't see the value in it or they don't see an opportunity, or maybe they've lost interest. But I love hearing the stories of the individuals that keep on going, that keep on growing and keep on striving for more. And in the construction industry, there's so many success stories of people that started in skilled trades and now own companies today, or they're in middle management, upper management. And it's one of those industries where the sky's kind of the limit. It'll take you as far as you want to go because you can keep growing and keep learning as long as you're with an organization that's going to keep investing in you. And that's really kind of the beauty of this. And I think so many kids today are missing out on the opportunity. And I think parents miss out on the opportunity too, because you hit on something when we first started talking about this, and that was pay scales. And I think a lot of people don't understand the pay scale in the construction industry and how well it pays. And there are some incredible jobs out there that create some viable careers to support families.
I'll give you an example. One of my grandsons is dyslexic. Okay. Academics is hard on him. Of course, his brother and cousins are all four of them are in college, and him and the other one's going to go to college, and they're mine. So my grandson was lucky enough, the community he lives in, Kelvin, a bunch of contractors got together and they sort of did a day of the trades where students could go through and they could test things out. They could try things out. He came out of that so pumped on not only what job he could do, but the money he could make. He was already told me, if I get this job, I can retire at 55. Now he's 17 years old, but somebody laid out the whole journey he can be on. Well, here's what it did. Number one, it attracts somebody to the trades. Number two, it also really pumped him about what a great career that is. I got a Wisconsin paper, Kelvin, this week I get to me. And do you know what the local trade technical school does? They have signing day. So you know how when people these athletes all sign and they have the big banner? They got 41 high school students that are coming to their technical school to learn a trade, and they had a signing day, just like you do in college when you're going to sign their scholarship to go to college. And I thought, is that not cool to have a signing day?
I've seen it. I think it's a great way to showcase the industry and get young men and women excited about their next steps and what they're about to do, because it should be showcased that way, because it's certainly careers that are no less than any other career that's been chosen out there. And, I was at a workforce summit here in Pensacola just this week, and I heard one of the panel members say something, in good humor, that if you needed an attorney, we could have 50 of them in the room by close of business today, because there's plenty of them. But he said, if you need a plumber and an electrician, maybe next Wednesday or Thursday or the week after, or whenever they can get to you. And the example wasn't meant to be negative towards certainly anybody in the legal profession. It was just showcasing the shortage of folks in the construction industry and how bad you need people.
I'll give you another example, Kelvin. I speak periodically at commencement addresses at colleges. And there's different commencement addresses for those that are in the engineering program, or those that are in the nursing program, or different ones. And I sort of sit there and watch the graduation. And I almost in the back of my mind say to myself, they probably won't get a job. They probably won't get a job. It's a nice major, but it's not going to get them a job. Unless they go get masters or something, then that's even not going to get them a job. I say to people, the reason these big construction projects put all that, what is that, like vinyl type stuff around the fencing, the cloth, or said it's not to guard so people can't look in. It's so contractors can't yell, "Hey, why don't you come work for me today?" I mean, when we built some of our buildings that you've been involved in, there's such a shortage. We had people stopping by trying to find the people leaving for lunch to see if they could hire to come work for them. Because if you're in trades today or want to be in trades today, you can you can try switch jobs and work the second shift for somebody else. Now, I'm just saying it's a great profession. It's like nursing. It saves lives. To drive, can you imagine how cool that is? Like for people that drive by Maritime Park, this baseball stadium, say, wow, I helped build that. You know, I ran into a cement worker the other day that was telling me where he put cement into the ballpark. Or you drive by a school and you say, all these kids are getting educated because of what I did. Or you drive by houses and you see people living their memories are in a house. And I think the trades is such a noble profession. I'm just enamored with people in the trades. Today I was at my wife's new Great Harvest restaurant and I'm looking at like the ceiling and the tile. And when people come in, they're pumped about the bread, but they're also pumped about the feeling. So tradespeople create feelings and create experiences.
You won't talk to anybody, in my opinion, that's any more interesting than someone that is in the skilled trades that's just really excited about what they do each and every day. And, you know, we'll have these projects that are extremely important to the community that provide a service, whether it be healthcare, education. And those projects, I think, just hold a little bit more of a special meaning to you when you walk away and you know that you've created a space that children can be educated in, or you've created a space where someone can receive health care and maybe save their life or improve their quality of life through that facility. And when you talk to these men and women that are a part of it, they're just so proud to be a piece of it, to be a part of it. And I think that goes back to just, you know, one thing that oftentimes we don't talk about, and I've tried to be extremely conscious of talking to my oldest child about this, and he just graduated. One of the things that I told him that at my age and this point in my life, that I truly believe that true success is found in living a life that you enjoy getting up every day and living. And that's not only in your personal life, but in your professional life, meaning I would have a hard time doing this if I didn't enjoy getting up doing it every day. And I think that goes for anybody that does anything. And if you can't find enjoyment, now I'm not saying that I think I'd make some radical career change if I just woke up tomorrow and decided that I didn't want to be in construction anymore. But I really enjoy it. And I know people that really enjoy it. And I think it really shows in their work ethic and the end results, the products that they produce, because they love what they do.
Well, yeah, I always say when I speak, try not to say the word got to or have to. And I don't mean you do, people do it on purpose. But if I say I got to go to work, I become a hostage. I have no I have to do this. If you say the word get to, it changes your brain. Well, I get to do this. You know, my dad was a mechanic that worked on diesel engines that went in trains. He liked being stopped at railroad tracks because he'd tell us about the trains he'd worked on. Now, when he came home, he worked on lawnmowers and outboard motors and car engines. Why? Because he was a mechanic. When I would drive into our driveway when I got older, I felt like I was at a filling station. He'd run out and with his hands tell me to lift the hood because he had to check my oil immediately. So I think the other great thing about the trades, if you find a job that you have joy in, you can also do it almost for fun. The neighbors all call on you. You know, my dad, he was the only blue collar guy in our neighborhood. He was the most popular guy in the entire neighborhood. I mean,
how to fix everything.
He was working on somebody's plumbing or wiring something or finishing somebody's basement off. I mean, all the people looked at like, well, and they all thought my dad was the coolest dad in the whole neighborhood because he could do engines. You know, their dads were doing boring stuff somewhere, some office.
That's awesome. I'm going to shift a little bit because we've been talking about building better people. And if we invest and we build better people by building better workforce, we can build better communities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in Pensacola, we've built a better community over a period of time, and you've been instrumental in that. I tell people when you come up in conversation that I personally think that you were the pivotal moment for Pensacola to really change the landscape of this community and bring it to where it is today. I want to talk a little bit, though, about the ingredients that create a thriving community. And you did a phenomenal job trying to educate people through Civicon and the things that you do to help inform people and overcome the misinformation sometimes that gets drummed up in a community when it's looking at change. And Pensacola was looking at change.
Well, I don't think I was looking to change. I think sometimes change agents have to sometimes come from the outside, because sometimes they see it with fresh eyes, and people that live in a community love their community, but sometimes it's like looking at your own kid. You can't, everybody's got the smartest kids, best looking kid, the whole bit. And what happened with me as a special ed teacher, and it ties into that, your goal as a special ed teacher is to optimize somebody's human potential. So in my DNA, even when I was messed up, I never lost the fact I wanted to help people. I got caught with this disease of alcoholism, but I still in my heart always wanted to help people. You know what I was doing today before I got on the phone call? Trying to get a woman who's got a son with autism, who's obsessed with elevators, a part-time job at the Wahoo Stadium, driving the elevator. Okay.
Terrific.
That's trying to help match someone's human potential. So when I got to Pensacola, my goal was to optimize Baptist Hospital. Then I traveled the country, and my company was very successful. We became the dominant player in culture in healthcare. Gallup contacted me and said, the hospitals you work with outperform other hospitals. We'd like to study you. So in 2005, I went to Washington, D.C. and met Jim Clifton, the chairman of Gallup. And while we were talking about healthcare, he mentioned they had just done the largest study ever on why do some communities thrive and some don't? Okay. So I got a copy of it. And, Kelvin, like I was talking to somebody the other day, they're talking about you go to a program on family systems and you realize, that's why the oldest child is like this. The second, once the light bulb goes on, you can't turn it off, in my mind. So I got back to Pensacola and I just said, no wonder we're not thriving. Now, some people might think we did. We get caught up at the time we have the Blue Angels and White Beaches, but we still only had 9% of our students who went to college ever want to come back. And people that wanted trades or work in other places. There weren't the trade jobs here. So it's about opportunities. Our jobs, what do young people want? They want jobs and a cool downtown. That's what I didn't understand, a cool downtown. So I'll go real quick for your listeners. I read the study and it told me three things. You got to invest in your local companies, and it's not like shop local. It's helping them have the skills to be successful. You've got to help people learn the skills to run a business, whether it's construction or anything else. Number two, you got to help startups. I mean, I've helped some startup construction companies by being their first job. Or, Gus, who does the desserts at Blue Wahoo Stadium now, is going to open up a little dessert area down, so you have to help these startups. But then what got me, Kelvin, which changed me the most, is I said, you need a great downtown. And so what's a great downtown? Well, number one, it has to be programmed. You can't expect people to open a restaurant or a clothing store if there's nobody down there. So you got to bring people downtown. They also said it's good if you build something that brings lots of people downtown. The stadium, lots of people downtown on a regular basis. That's why we have such little parking. We didn't want to put it in a place where you got acres and acres of parking where people come to a game but do nothing else. So you limit the parking so people have to be downtown. So then the second thing is you got to help your small startups. Those are your entrepreneurs. And, that's why my wife and I started the Studer Community Institute. That's why we run VMS for mentoring, all sorts of cool stuff. So once you do that, then, Kelvin, they say, well, then people want an office space downtown. So as you know, Green Hut built the office I'm sitting in right now called Maritime Place Office Building. And people told me, you're wasting your money because no one's going to pay that much for Class A office space in Pensacola. Kelvin, we had to add a fourth floor once we started to it because the demand was there. So then the biggest challenge was residential because, if you want to keep a town from tipping back, you want to have residential because that keeps people downtown safety wise, but it also keeps people downtown when the economy wiggles back and forth. So my wife and I invested in Southtown which we had a rough time getting a loan because people didn't know it would work. And we had to put down 22 million to borrow 30. And I talked to a banker the other day that said, Quint, ever since you showed apartment buildings work, we finance apartment buildings now in Pensacola, Florida, because you showed that it works. So I think you have to have an intentional plan. So my wife and I, and in my book, The Creating a Vibrant Community, you've got to get wealth off the sidelines. And that's people that have money that are going to do good work, not philanthropy per se. That's great though. Snoozeland's example of Bill Greenhut raising money for special needs students that I was involved with, Lacey Collier. So you have to have a plan. And then I think the coolest thing we did later, Kelvin, was Civicon. We bring these subject matter experts in to talk about, why you should shrink a street, why density is good, why you don't want to only put good stuff in certain neighborhoods. You want to put good stuff in all neighborhoods. So yeah, and didn't think it's anything different than what I did in special ed. Instead of optimizing a child's potential, you're optimizing a community's potential. And it's pretty cool, but it was tough. As you know, Rick Outson's book, if you haven't read it, Right Idea, Right Time, Rick talks about the mid 2005 and 6 when this community was fighting much of what I was trying to do. And Katie White recently read the book and wrote a beautiful note. I had no idea how hard this was, because people now look at it and say, well, that's just a no-brainer. But it's hard. So yeah, but what greater thing to do? People ask me, what's my favorite part of this? I say, sitting at a Blue Wahoo game and watching 700 kids chase a cockroach at a baseball.
It's a great place. You've created an opportunity and a space down there for the community that will long outlive any of us, and it'll be certainly a legacy project. One thing that I found to be so interesting that you did, though, was your investment into Civicon and providing information to the community about what you were intending to do and what you wanted to do, and getting community input and trying to get the right information out there. And I'm saying this because I think it's important, because I see so many other communities in Northwest Florida that do fight positive change and do fight positive growth. And I just want to touch on this for just a minute, because I do think it's important. And I'd like for you to share from your perspective the importance of making sure that you're getting the right information out there, and that you're educating people on the end result of what this could be for a community.
Wow.
And what role that played into your success of being able to do what you've done for Pensacola.
That was reactionary. I got real frustrated because I wanted the Y to go next to the stadium on parcel 8, which I still think it should be there. And I got frustrated because it made so much sense. And I said, why are people fighting this? And let's give everybody an exit strategy and say they didn't know. John Cotter of Harvard says if you want to create change, in the old days, Kelvin, change wasn't hard in a community. You had one big employer, you had a locally owned newspaper with a strong publisher, and a locally owned bank. Those three people could sit in a room and almost move a community. Today, we don't have many locally owned banks, don't have locally owned media per se, and don't really have many locally owned large businesses that aren't not-for-profit. They're not even locally owned per se. So how do you do it? And John Cotter says you got to get a critical mass of people. So Civicon was trying to create a critical mass. So if you bring a lot of people in the room and you bring in a subject matter experts, they might not all agree, but they're going to be closer. So when we brought in Shane Phillips, because people were moaning about gentrification, we brought in the national expert on gentrification from UCLA. And he came to Pensacola and said, you don't have gentrification. You got a lack of supply.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's not affordable, and you have a lack of changes, different variety of housing. So if you look at now, Chuck Barone says, use infill housing. Michelle White and Jeff Speck said you got to make it walkability. Look at Palafox. I wish there was no parking on Palafox, but it's going to be so much better because it's so much more walkable. Bruce Beach is another example. That was because somebody from Civicon from New York came in and said, hey, you got this empty space that's fenced off out there. Have you ever thought about taking it back? And so Civicon, I think, changes things. And we talk a lot about downtown, but let's talk about Beulah. That big acres out there. At first, somebody said, well, we need to be a Commerce Park because we're going to attract 1,000 manufacturing jobs. Well, that'd be great, but there are no 1,000 manufacturing jobs right now interested in that. So some citizens, Teresa Blackwell and some other citizens, went to the county commission and said, we should do a plan. Nathan Federal stepped in and said, let's do a plan. They hired DMZ and they said, okay, whoa, because you had two sides. One wanted it more neighborhood, one wanted it Commerce Park. So they said, well, let's try to do both and we'll see where the interest is. Where all the interest so far has been on the residential side. But the beauty about it, people think, well, won't more residents create more traffic? No, not if you put amenities as part of the residential. Today, people just don't build houses that do things right. They build playgrounds into it. They build schools into them. They build amenities into it. So I think that's where smart growth kicks into. So CivicCon, I think, has been very exciting. And we have Civic Leaders Summit coming up in this fall again, where you have people from around the country coming to Pensacola to share what they've learned and also for them to see Pensacola. Fred Levin told me one time that when attorneys flew in here, the one thing they said is this is the only town we fly into that looks exactly the same for the last 30 years. Today, it doesn't look.
It did for many years.
Today, it doesn't look the same. And that all creates financial sustainability. So if you look at all the growth in 2005, assessed property value within the CRA of Pensacola was about $550 million. Now it's a couple billion. And that money pays for fire department, police. I would rather have more people paying taxes than people paying more taxes.
I like it. It's a great point. All right. Last question. What would you tell your younger self today?
I would probably tell my younger self not to worry as much. A fella told me, I grew up in a worrying family. My mother worried if she didn't have something to worry about. And a guy came up to me and said, what were you worrying about a year ago? And I said, I don't know, but I know it was bad. And I probably thought if I get through this, it won't be as bad. So I work real hard on myself, Kelvin. I'm always working, from hypnosis to reading. It's probably to just be, and I try to, I'm a recovering alcoholic, so you're supposed to live one day at a time. But I spend a lot of time in yesterday and a lot of time in tomorrow, which means you mess up on today. So I think we're reducing the worry.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think we all do it. Some of us do it a little more than others, but I think that signals that you care. You care about yourself. You care about what you're doing. You care about the product that you're creating in your day-to-day life and business. So, Quint, thank you for your time. I appreciate you joining me and looking forward to catching up again soon.
Thank you very much. God bless you, my friend.